One of the most important parts of any training within the internal arts is the preparation for the training. It's kind of like setting the scene within your body before you do the practice. So the preparation serves as the foundation for the results that you're trying to achieve. And I think that's important to understand, because I've seen sometimes people fall foul of trying to engage in a practice before they're ready, before the foundations are there. And obviously what that does is tend to put a glass ceiling on the results as much as anything else. So the preparation for the microcosmic orbit is very, very important. We have preparation that should be done specifically right before we do a practice, but then we also have preparation with regards to the level of skill we should already have attained within our body prior to attempting to activate the start of the microcosmic orbit. So the preparation really for us refers to a couple of things. The first is the breath. The quality of your breathing wants to be at a certain stage prior to beginning microcosmic orbit practice. And there's various reasons for this, which I'll explore in a second. If your breathing is not of the correct quality, if it doesn't have the correct gong contained within it, then it's going to make the microcosmic orbit either a little bit sort of choppy in quality or very difficult to begin, or in some cases it can actually deplete the body, because your breath has a very, very close connection to that spark of energy within your system, you know. Second thing that needs to be prepared is the quality of the dantian, the lower elixir field that anybody who encounters Qigong practice or alchemy practice or Neigong practice will understand that the Neigong, this lower battery, referring to the dantian that sits down in the bottom of the abdomen, this dantian, this lower battery needs to be built to a certain extent in order for the microcosmic orbit to be a sensible practice. In actual fact, the opening of the Du channel, the beginning of the microcosmic orbit, actually begins automatically when the dantian is at a certain stage of development anyway, providing we just put a couple of little tweaks into our exercises. So what I want to do is explore a little bit about what we need with regards to your breath and the dantian in order for the body to be ready for this practice. So first of all, let's just look at the breath, look at the nature of the breathing. So your breathing does all of the obvious things you would imagine. So we can talk about, needing enough of oxygen within the body, the balance of O2 and CO2 and things like this and what have you. But on top of that, there is also the aspect to your breath that relates to the mind. So if the breath is very high within the body, that's normally, in the vast majority of cases, a reflection of what's going on with regards to the quality of your mind. Whereas the breath is anchored very, very low down within the body, then it means your foundation of the quality of your mind is normally at a good stage. It means your mind is very settled, very centered, which is essentially what you require to progress on with Neigong training. The breathing also wants to be settled very low within the body so that you can effectively make the transition from abdominal to reverse abdominal breathing. And these two methods really are the core of how we start to convert the energy within the dantian and move it into the microcosmic orbit itself. Beyond that, there are also some alchemical aspects to the breathing that we have to understand as well. And these are the basis for many Neidan teachings. So first, more specifically, there is a classic called the Sun Tong, there's no I there. I'll chase it up. Classic called the, I can spell it properly for you, called the Sun Tong Qi, which is sometimes translated as the Triplex Unity Classic or something like this. Yeah. But this classical text is a very important alchemical text that anybody who studies anything like alchemy or the microcosmic orbit or Neigong wants to be sort of fairly familiar with. It's one of the key classics. And within it, they discuss very much an important line called, and it says, know the white, but stick with the black. Know the white, but stick with the black, or know the white, but remain with the black, if you like. This is a line that's actually borrowed from the Tao Te Ching. And in the Tao Te Ching, it was referring to a slightly different concept. But what they do is they'll take a philosophical ideal from Taoism and then apply it to alchemy. Now, with regards to philosophy, what they're really referring to is something to do with your perception or the quality of mind or something like this. But with regards to alchemy, what they're doing is they're allowing this philosophical concept to be reflected in the body. So they will have an actual bodily or energetic process that matches this line, this philosophy, and this is what we need to understand. And know the white, but stick with the black is ultimately an instruction on the quality of your breathing, okay, the importance of your breathing. It is said that if you know the white, but stick with the black, then what will happen is you will be able to refine true lead from its source. Sometimes they say refine true lead from its ore, or sometimes refine true lead from native lead. It depends upon how it is translated, who is doing the translation. But ultimately what they're trying to do, the idea is to extract lead from its source, yeah. So these terms initially might seem a little confusing, but actually a lot of these are to do with instructions with how do you manage the inside of the body. Remember that internal alchemy terminology was often taken from external alchemy, where they were trying to use literal substances like lead and mercury, silver and gold within their practice. Internal alchemy used their terminology in order to explain certain concepts. Much of the teachings were hidden this way to make sure people didn't misuse the teachings or didn't have access to things they didn't have a right to, you know. So if we break this down, the white represents the element of metal within esoteric terminology and the way they translate colors across the elements. And especially in this case, what we're talking about is the energy of the lungs. So we need to understand or to know the quality of the breathing, to understand what state it is supposed to be at. Yeah. But we remain with, or rather we attach the breathing to black, which is the element of water, which is the kidneys. So what they're implying is that we have a very strong interaction that we're trying to set up between the lungs and the kidneys. Sometimes people have misunderstood the white and black to refer to yin and yang, but this would be more how we're discussing things on the level of mind, on the level of thought. But with regards to our chemical practice, it's the lungs and the kidneys. They are the reflection of this process within the body. We need to refine true lead, which basically is qi. So the reason they talk about qi being true lead is because lead is one of the ingredients that is used within external alchemy. It's not a very high level one. It's not like silver, it's not like gold, but it still needs purifying, it still needs refining. Yeah. And this qi is the ingredient that's going to be used within our chemical training. Yeah. So the qi is the true lead, is the reflection of true lead. It's not as high as Shen, it's not as high as the elixir, as the Dan, but it is an important ingredient that we need to refine. Its source, sometimes called native lead or the ore, is the Jing, or the essence. So we need to learn how to refine the essence into qi using the relationship of the lungs and the kidneys. And this is the basis for how we set up the breath and how we develop the quality of the breathing so that it is ready, not only for microcosmic orbit, but also for higher level alchemical training as well. Yeah. Qigong alone, the exercises, the movements maybe don't need this level of development, but anything deeper than relaxation exercises will. Yeah. So we have a few correspondences that we want to understand within the body. The first of these is that the lung qi, or the lungs action, the quality of your breath, the functions carried out by the lungs, must be anchored to the kidneys. Anchored to the kidneys. So the idea is that the kidneys and the kidney energy sit around the base of the body. So I know they actually sit around your lower back underneath the sort of line of the rib cage, but energetically they also correspond to the lower dantian and the base of the body. This is known as the water element region because the strength of the kidneys governs this whole area, this band around here. So the lung qi must be anchored to the kidneys. So the idea is that when we breathe, there is a focal point to the breathing. Does the breathing remain high in the chest? Does it remain under the clavicles? Does it get stuck up here around the rib cage? Does it get caught on the diaphragm? All of these would indicate a slightly unanchored breathing. The breath is not anchored. Because the idea is that when you breathe, the focal point, not just the stretch of your abdomen, but the actual focal point for the effect of the breath, the influence of the breath, must be low down within the water element region of the body. We don't make that happen. I don't agree with practices where people try to sort of consciously push their breath very low down in the body, because that would be the lungs making the action. We don't want that. The kidneys are the anchor. So the idea is that if the kidney energy is refined in the correct fashion, then when you breathe, what will happen is the lung energy will be pulled down by the kidneys and naturally anchor very, very low down in the body. No need to breathe nice and deep or try to stretch different regions of your body or try to force the breath down. The kidneys will do the work. Okay, they will pull the breath down. If the kidneys are unanchored, then the breath is like a balloon that is trying to escape, a helium balloon. It is not caught, it is not anchored down yet. If the lung qi is anchored to the kidneys effectively, then you will have the beginnings of abdominal breathing. And abdominal breathing, as in not forced, not contrived, but natural abdominal breathing, is the first of the breathing patterns we need to prepare for the microcosmic orbit. Now, the kidney energy, when it is anchoring the breath down, what it means is that now there starts to be an interaction between qi and jing. An interaction between qi and jing. And this is what we need to start developing within the body so that the energy starts to build. It's not a high enough energy to fill the dantian. It's not a high enough energy to refine and convert into Shen or anything like this. It is purely an interaction of the acquired energies, the postnatal energy within your body. Yeah. The kidneys must be nice and strong in order for the breath to be anchored. Somebody with very, very weak kidneys will have a lot of difficulty anchoring their breath. So when I've taught people Qigong, I've got some people that when they start, they breathe very, very high, and they've been told to try to force the breath down, or a lot of people will say they feel stuck around the solar plexus or the diaphragm, it's like the breath won't go down. And okay, you can release the diaphragm, you can try to stretch the body, but ultimately, the problem probably resides within the energy of the water element or the kidneys, the ore from which the true lead must be extracted. Because if the kidney energy was strong enough, if the base of the body was strong enough, if the water element was strong enough, then the breath would naturally move down past all of these obstacles and anchor itself into the dantian anyway. So the breathing can be manufactured or changed in a contrived fashion, but actually it's more efficient to try to understand the correspondences between metal and water within the body, and then the breath will change in the right way, in a more effective way. We can say that a contrived breathing method is something we try to change. We try to breathe here, we try to breathe there, we try to breathe in this way, this many seconds, so on and so on. That is still just a method, a technique. If, however, the kidney energy is strong enough, the water element is conditioned so that the breath stretches down to anchor itself into the water element, then we can say that this is a quality. And a quality is always better than a technique, better than a method. So if our body has the quality of correct breathing, then our foundations are good. Then we are ready to move on. If the quality is there, it means the breathing will be of a high level, even if I am ignoring it, even if I am not focusing on it and I'm carrying out other tasks, I am safe in the knowledge that the quality of correct breathing is there. So how to establish the strength of the kidneys? Before we look at any practices, the ore from which the true lead must be extracted. First of all, we need to look at stress. Okay, number one, your stress levels. Now the kidneys and the adrenals and the nervous system, they have a very, very close relationship. The kidneys are around the back near the Du channel, which essentially is a large part of that is a large complex of nerves that run through the spine. Adrenaline is obviously closely related to the kidneys anyway. If there is a lot of mental stress, emotional stress, then the kidneys are under strain. If there is chronic stress, chronic mental disturbance, then the kidneys start to deplete. As they start to deplete in energy, they become exhausted, then they no longer anchor the lung qi, so the breath will rise within the body. So the first step towards anchoring the breath to the kidneys is to calm the mind. Now we can calm the mind acutely. We might have a calming method, or we can sit and relax and let it go. But also then we have a chronic level of stress as well, which is partially to do with our life, but more importantly on how to do with how are you dealing with your life. Because some people have a different stress threshold, right? So some people can have a very minor difficulty in life that is very, very stressful. Some people can have a lot going on that doesn't register very high on their stress levels just because they have a different threshold to how they deal with such things. There's also the other factor that maybe some people's stress affects them in the mind, so it's very easy for them to understand their stress because they're emotional, where some people are very centered, but the stress affects them in the body. So instead of affecting the mind, often it goes to the kidneys. When that happens, it means someone will be able to function for a long time, but then they'll start to get burnout after a while. Physical disease will arise. Often the back goes, the kidneys start to go, then they get tinnitus, and then their energy levels will just plummet. And this can be to do with stress levels depleting the kidneys, just too much fight or flight. Now we want to take our body out of this stress state, definitely, out of the stress state, so the kidneys can relax. We want this for two purposes. One, so the kidneys will anchor the lung qi, as I've been discussing, so that everything is very, very settled down in the base of the body. And secondly, because the microcosmic orbit passes qi along the Du channel. Now, if the qi passes along the Du channel, the channel that runs up your back, and the kidneys are not very strong, or they're not very anchored, they're not very centered, if your stress levels are very high, then what will happen is it'll actually throw your stress levels into a further stress state. It would be like throwing petrol on the fire for your fight or flight mode, But if you're all very, very relaxed and the kidneys are very, very strong and the breath is very anchored, and then you open the microcosmic orbit, as the Du channel flows and the qi goes into the nerves, it's able to mobilize the body's energy without putting you into fight or flight. And that's very, very important. A lot of the people that have struggled with microcosmic orbit emotionally, essentially is because they've opened a channel that has a close relationship to the kidneys and the adrenals. So it started to give them sort of panic attacks, anxiety attacks, and things like that, just because it's putting them into a stressor state. And we wish to avoid that. And this is, again, why all these sort of foundation training comes in. The second aspect to strengthening the kidneys is to do with your physical exertion levels. So again, these are all just foundations of things to keep in mind while you're doing this kind of work. Now, the kidneys will get burnt up not just through stress, but also through physical stress of overwork as well. So you must have a good level of balance of rest and play within the body, if you like, rest and work. So if you are, an overachiever, a workaholic, or maybe just that's you, or maybe because of what's going on in your life, maybe you're establishing a new business or you're moving house or something, or, sometimes you have these periods where you have to do a lot. Maybe you've got new kids, who knows, all these different things, yeah. What will happen is obviously there's a lot more physical work required of you. During that period, your kidneys are going to be a little bit more stressed. The breath is going to be less rooted. What that means is if you're in one of those periods of your life, it's not the right time to begin trying the microcosmic orbit exercises. I don't think so. It would be better to simply try the exercises to do with consolidating the kidney energy and anchoring the breath. And probably that's enough for you at the moment. I think that you should wait for a calmer period of your life, a more settled one, where you've got more time and you can kind of get your work-rest balance to a correct level. Then is a good time to begin working on the microcosmic orbit. At the same time, if you don't have enough physical exertion, that can also deplete the kidneys. There needs to be some kind of stimulation for things to function. It's like if you don't use it, you lose it. Yeah. So if I don't work enough and there's not enough exercise, there's not enough movement, I'm just sat on the couch all day, maybe through choice, or maybe you've been sick, maybe you've been ill for a while and you've been rested up, for a few weeks or something. Your kidneys are going to be almost in a dormant state, not in a still state in a good way, but slightly dormant. So we need to kick them back into action. So you also need some physical activity. So it's all about healthy levels of understanding what is just right for you until the kidneys are in a good state. Third one. Okay. Sexual activity. sexual activity needs to be regulated and balanced so it's at a right level. If you are somebody who is overly sexually stimulated, which can come in various forms, it can either be through intercourse or masturbation, or even mental stimulation through too much visual experience, so maybe pornography or graphic material like this. Any of those things, any of those parts of your life are going to stimulate the kidneys into action. And what they actually do is they extract a certain substance, a form of yang energy from the jing, from the essence, that can be quite depleting. Now, that's, the body, if you're healthy, is able to do that. I'm not saying you need to be celibate at all. But that yang spark that's contained within the essence actually becomes very, very important for the microcosmic orbit. It's like we can extract that energy for sexual pleasure, sexual desire, or we can extract that energy for microcosmic orbit practice or cultivation. There is a choice between the two. Now, it is actually the yang spark contained within the jing that is the part of your essence that anchors the lung qi. And some people don't know that. They think it is purely just the kidneys or something, but it's not. It's actually the yang spark contained within the yin essence of the jing. So what that means is during overstimulation of sexual activity, either mentally or literally, then what will happen is the yang spark is being used for something else. It is moving into the stimulation, the erotic parts of your mind, those parts of your being connected to sexuality, instead of being used to anchor the breath. So after long periods of staying within that state, the breath will start to rise high up within the body and the anchor is gone. So this can affect your foundation as well. Now, if we actually go back to the saying of refining the true lead from its source, with regards to Qigong, with regards to Neigong, actually the part of the essence that we use to create Qi, okay, to extract from the essence, is that yang spark. We don't deplete the yin to build Qi, and that's very, very important to understand. So maybe I'll write this here for you, because I think sometimes people miss this. If you have your jing, this is your essence, okay? This is the fuel within the oil lamp, okay? The energy bar on the video game character. When it's gone, you're dead. This is your essence. It contains two parts, yin and yang. The yin aspect of your essence actually goes on to form substances, functions, functional substances within the body. So yin, they say, is form, yang is action. So with regards to like the creation of fresh blood or reproduction of cells or generation of more tissues, growth of the body, any of these kind of things, it is normally the yin aspect of the jing that is doing this, that is creating that physical matter. The yin aspect of the jing is creating the cells. The yin aspect of the jing is creating the blood and so on and so on. So the natural functions that your body goes through is to do with the yin aspect of the jing within alchemy. That's the form, the substance aspect of it. It is the yin aspect that is supposed to contain the blueprints for the length of your life. Okay, that is what is there. There is enough fuel there for you to live out your existence. The yang aspect of the jing is more to do with functional activities of the body rather than form. So the yang aspect of it, the spark contained within the yin, that little yang seed within the jing, symbolized by this symbol. This is the kan hua, known as water within the I Ching. And the two broken lines represent the yin aspect of jing, and the yang solid line represents the yang spark of your essence, of your jing. Now, the yang spark of your essence is what starts to warm the body or to make the Ming fire kick into action, okay, the fire around the back of your kidneys. It's the part of your essence that governs the movement and mobilization of qi and the actions of qi within the body. Now, we wish to use that spark and extract it within the body to create a very efficient energy source that we can use for our practice. Yeah. The true lead that they are referring to is actually the qi that is created from the yang spark of the jing. That is the true lead. So the ore of the jing is the yin lines within this symbol. So the idea is, if I put this in red, that we wish to extract the true lead, this pure yang, from the ore of the Jing, from the unrefined aspect of the lead, if you like. Yeah, this is what we're trying to do. There are various ways this takes place. There are various processes in it, but the first way, the most basic way, the basic way that doesn't involve any major alchemical tools, no firing up of cauldrons and furnaces or anything like this, like you read about, is to do with anchoring the breath correctly into the kidneys. Because as the white starts to remain with the black, as the lungs start to interact with the kidneys, then the true lead will be extracted from its source. Now that all sounds easy enough, right? But ultimately, what I'm trying to get at is the first thing you're going to do before you do any of this practice is look at your lifestyle and your habits. Lifestyle and habits. Stress will cause the yang aspect of the Jing to fire up and put you into fight or flight. It gives you a kind of false kind of energy, an energy based on adrenaline, but not actually an energy based on that yang aspect of Jing being converted into qi. Overly engaging in physical exertion depletes the yang, and overactivity with sexual activity, over-engaging in sexual activity, also depletes the yang. Now, one of the main reasons that this can then become a problem is because yin will, I'm going to put this here on the board, convert into yang. Yin will convert into yang. And this really is the root of how the essence starts to deplete. That's one of the rules of yin and yang, that they can be interchangeable from one to another. One source can transform to another source. Now, if the yin aspect of your Jing contains the fluid for life, the ability to reproduce your cells or produce the blood, or maybe for the DNA to remain healthy, and all of these kind of physical things, physiological things, and yang contains the energy for the body, what will happen is if I deplete the yang aspect of the Jing, then the yin aspect of the Jing will start to convert more. It will convert into yang to replace that central line of the symbol of the Kanquai, if you like. This means that the yin starts to become depleted. The yin is not depleted because you are using it up directly. The yin is becoming depleted because it's trying to replace the yang spark that you're using incorrectly through your activity. The result of this is, in Chinese medicine, we say you become yin deficient, I suppose would be the term. Kidney yin deficient or just yin deficient. And there's all sorts of signs and thermal interactions that take place in the body when this happens. But with regards to your life and with regards to alchemy, when the yin starts to break down, then the aging process is faster. On top of this, the breath is not anchored quite so well, because the yang that is created from the yin spark is never going to be quite so good as it could be. It's like a, counterfeit yang, if you like, when the yin converts into it. It's not quite right. It's not the true spark. It's not the essence that we require, which is called Jinghua, or the flower, the cream of the crop of the Jing. Yeah, this is what we require. So in order to prepare for this means we have to do several things. One, we have to de-stress the body and de-stress the mind. Two, we have to understand the correct level of physical exertion, not exerting ourselves too much, but also doing some exercise. Three, regulating the sexual activity. And this includes not only intercourse or masturbation, but also mental stimulation on that level as well, because that yang spark also moves into action when that happens too. It actually causes a ministerial fire, if you know what that is, to blaze up within the body to affect the heart, which again uproots the breath away from the kidneys, which is why when people, the sort of esoteric understanding of why when people are aroused mentally, okay, they've been stimulated, the breathing gets faster, the heart rate gets higher, because the breath is moving up into this area of the chest that yang qi is already in movement. So we need to refine the quality of the mind at the same time. Then once we have our lifestyle and habits in place, then we need to work with our breathing to cause the breath to be anchored into the kidneys correctly. That's our first step. And the first exercise that I want to show you is very simply how to get the mind and the breath to the correct state for our practice. Once we've done that, then the next stage will be to begin looking at the Dantian and what this actually means. But please do not neglect the quality of the breath, because it is vitally important to all of these practices. It's not that we need a clever technique just yet, or any kind of breath retentions, or breathing for certain times, or moving certain muscles in the body. It's not that. It's just that the general quality of the breath must adhere to these principles from alchemy to make sure that your breathing is nice and healthy, and that you're actually making the kidneys and the lungs relate to each other in the correct fashion. Yeah. Let's look at that.